I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on unDivided, Democrats in Olympia have decided that their closing act this legislative session will be to hurt working-class families even further.
Having received a constitutional majority in gross substitute House Bill 1589 as amended by the Senate is declared pass.
Also, a WSDOT whistleblower joins us to discuss his lawsuit against the state of Washington. And it turns out the man responsible for killing a Washington State Patrol trooper is in the country illegally, and he has a long criminal history. That and more coming up today on unDivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to unDivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Man, rough news day, I will say. There's some things that have me absolutely livid, so out of touch with sanity and common sense. And we're seeing, gosh, there's a reason we have this show and the frustration that I think reasonable people have about what the hell is going on. What the hell is going on with these policies around a variety of things, each of which we're going to touch on today? Public safety, substance abuse, homelessness, environmental policies being pushed through that we all knew, those of us with an ounce of common sense knew were going to have disastrous, even deadly consequences, immigration policies. And I don't know if we just didn't scream loud enough in the moment while all of this was happening and we saw the train barreling down the tracks toward a bridge that was out and we just couldn't get them to stop in time. And now we see the result of it. And the question is, what are we going to do now? Where are we going to go from here? Have we had enough of being silent? Have we had enough of the bad fringe policies being shoved down our throat and killing people? Are we going to speak up, each and every one of us? Are we going to vote out the people who have done this? Are we going to show them that there are electoral consequences to their actions? Or are we just going to sit silent in our bubbles, in our own lives, and just say, okay, well, hopefully it doesn't impact me too much. I will promise you there's a day it's going to impact you if it hasn't already. As I said, we have multiple examples of this on the show today. And I will start with what has now become national news, and that is the revelation that the man who killed Washington State Trooper Christopher Gadd is in the country illegally. Not only is he in the country illegally, but there have been ample opportunities over the last decade plus of him breaking the law in a country that he's in illegally, that if we were not a sanctuary state, he would have been sent back to Mexico by ICE. So this actually is something that was confirmed by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which I was glad to see, that they were actually sending out an email with all the pertinent information about the suspect in this case, Raul Benitez Santana. Again, he's under arrest for vehicular homicide, accused of being high and drunk when he slammed into the back of 27-year-old Washington State Trooper Christopher Gadd, who was pulled over on the side of the road doing a DUI enforcement, father of a 2-year-old, had only been with WSP for 2 years. So this is all from ICE. And they explained, I just want to first read for you what they said in the email, because now there's an ICE detainer that has been placed on Santana while he's in custody in Snohomish County. They said that it's one of the operational directives associated with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ERO Seattle lodges immigration detainers against non-citizens who have been arrested for criminal activity and taken into custody by state or local law enforcement. An immigration detainer is a request from ICE, state or local law enforcement agencies to notify ICE as early as possible before a removable non-citizen is released, allowing ERO to assume custody for possible removal of the subjects to his home country in accordance with federal law. So that's what a detainer means. But here's some details they sent us on Raul Benitez Santana, 33 years old. It says, we placed an immigration detainer with the Snohomish County Jail on March 4th for Benitez Santana, who's a citizen of Mexico, currently being held on charges related to vehicular homicide. Santana is a citizen of Mexico unlawfully present in the U.S. He entered the U.S. at an unknown date and time, without admission or parole by an immigration officer, and was first encountered by ERO Seattle on October 28, 2013, at the South Correctional Entity in Burien, following his arrest for failure to appear for driving while his license was suspended. And then they list some of the known encounters he has had with law enforcement since he's been here. I'll also tell you, by the way, there is some indication that his criminal history perhaps goes back to as early as 2006, but here's what we know of. May 3rd, 2013, Linwood Municipal Court, driving while license suspended or revoked. May 16th, 2013, Linwood Municipal Court, marijuana possession of 40 grams or less, sentenced to 90 days incarceration with 87 days suspended. October 6, 2014, SeaTac Municipal Court, driving while license suspended or revoked, sentenced to 90 days incarceration with 85 days suspended. May 24th, 2019, King County Superior Court, domestic violence assault, no sentencing information available. Now, if we were not a sanctuary state, how would this work? Well, if we weren't a sanctuary state, what would happen is particularly when it comes to a domestic violence assault, you would have the jail or the local agency that picked him up realize this is a non-citizen who is not in this country legally. They'd contact ICE. They would coordinate with ICE to make sure that, let's say he's spending a month in jail, that the day that he gets out, ICE is waiting for him. They take him into custody. They bring him to the federal detention facility where individuals who are scheduled for deportation are held, and then he's kicked out of the country. Because one, he's here illegally, and two, he's here illegally breaking the law. That makes sense. This is the stupidity of the immigration debate. This is a country built on immigrants. This is a country where Lady Liberty says, give us your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. We should be proud of that as a country, that this is a place where people want to come. And if they want to go through the difficult process of coming to this country legally, if they want to go through the difficult process of seeking asylum here legally, fleeing whatever ills from their home country, we should welcome that. We do welcome that. But there should be a big red line between those people and the people who come here illegally and repeatedly break the law over and over and over and over. There should be no sanctuary for them, because they're not creating a sanctuary for everyone else. They're allegedly beating people like domestic partners. They're not following the laws on our roadways. And they are eventually, some of them, killing people, whether it's Lake and Riley in Georgia or whether it's a 27-year-old state patrol trooper, a father and a husband who was out there doing his job to keep the community safe. I get what was the sentiment around the sanctuary city and sanctuary state conversation to a certain extent. One of the concerns, if you are in a state where law enforcement suspects, oh, hey, I pulled over someone, he looks Hispanic, let me ask him if he's an illegal immigrant. I understand not wanting to do that. I understand not wanting to create an environment where people who have come here illegally are afraid to cooperate with law enforcement if they're the victim of a crime, if they've witnessed a crime. If you're in this country illegally, you shouldn't be. You should have gone through the process like thousands and thousands of other people do, and you should have come here legally. But if you're not breaking the law here and you witness a crime, I want you to feel like you can call 911 for help if you've witnessed or are the victim of a crime. And that they will come and they will help you, or they will help the person who's been victimized, who you're trying to help, without fear of deportation. I get that, I do. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about sanctuary policies that have created an environment that are providing sanctuary to criminals, to dangerous, violent criminals. And some people were saying when it was pointed out that this is an illegal immigrant, oh, well, how could it have been prevented? I just laid it out. What the sanctuary policies say is essentially there can't be cooperation between local jurisdictions and ICE. Seattle police aren't going to turn over an illegal immigrant to ICE. The jails can't call up ICE and say, hey, we've got someone, booked on attempted murder and looks like they're in the country illegally. Come and get them. They can't do that because woke ideology says, oh, you can't do that. Common sense says we absolutely should be doing that. And you can have all of these things exist at once. You can make sure that police aren't out there just harassing people about their immigration status, making them feel uncomfortable and making them feel like I can't call 911 if I'm the victim of a crime or if I witness a crime. But sure as hell, if you've got someone who has committed a crime and you've got them in custody and they are in this country illegally, there is no common sense reason in the world why you do not turn that person over to ICE where they can decide how fast can we get them out of here. What is controversial about that? This trooper would be alive today, and it is far from the only example of that. If we can't agree that we should remove people from the country who came here illegally, who are breaking our laws, who are victimizing our citizens, what the hell can we agree on? That is an insane ideology to continue to cling to. And it's all or the other. Oh, you hate people who are from different countries. You know, you're a bigot, whatever it is. That's not what this is about. No one with an ounce of common sense believes that that's what this is about. I will say, Cairo 7, again, I said, we think perhaps his criminal history, Benito Santana, goes back further than 2013. Cairo 7 says, in a court case, Benito Santana, long history of speeding. In 2012, he was caught driving 11 miles over the speed limit. 3 years later, he was cited for driving too fast for conditions. 2020, he was clocked at 49 miles over the speed limit. So he's continued to get away with these things as an illegal immigrant. And we already know that he was flying, according to a witness, going possibly as much as 100 miles an hour when he slammed into the back of that state trooper. Well, yeah, he's gotten away with this kind of behavior, escalating gradually since he came into the country at an unknown period in time. And our friend David Rose over at Fox 13 says he's doing a deep dive into his criminal history, and he believes it goes back to 2006 in Washington state. I will also say the kid gloves that some of the members of the media in Washington in Seattle in particular, are handling this guy with is insane. I was in TV for a long time, 10 years. And I understand that, generally it was the policy, we don't name someone, we don't show their face until they've been charged with a crime, officially charged with a crime. But there were always exceptions to that. There were always exceptions to that in notable cases. And one of the reasons we did that in the first place is, hey, we want to make sure that it's not like a case of mistaken identity. Picked up the wrong person, and now all of a sudden their face is blasted all over TV and their name, and then charges are dropped a day later, and it's like, oh, oops, sorry about that. But this is not one of those cases. He was at the scene. We know he did it. He's already said he was high and drunk. We know he did it. I get it. Innocent until proven guilty. Allegedly, whatever it is. We know he did it. It was fascinating to watch how the 4 major TV stations in Seattle, how differently they covered his first court appearance. Let's see. Let's look at all of them. Como News, King 5, Cairo 7, Fox 13. Como News and King 5 blurred out his face entirely. There's no reason for that. And I think King 5, somebody was telling me they didn't even hear them say that he was an illegal immigrant. Nicole, can you check and see if they've changed that yet?
Sure.
If they've updated it? Because that's obviously a relevant point. It's a relevant part of the story. Hiding the guy's face. There's no need to hide his face. Look at it. It's freaking all bloodied up. Because that's what happened to him when he slammed into the back of Trooper Gadd's vehicle. And of course, it's always the criminal who survives. You see that in DUI crashes all the time. It's always the criminal who walks away relatively unscathed and the innocent person who dies. So credit to Cairo 7 and Fox 13. I know both of them have said that he is illegal and have shown his face on TV, as they should. We'll look into whether King 5 has come around to the idea of stating the obvious, which has been confirmed by ICE, that he's in the country illegally. So again, this is one of those things. It's like, guys, I mean, come on. We can find, there is so much space here to come to a common sense way of dealing with the immigration crisis. There is so much room for common ground. I've talked about it at the national level. Dreamers, give them citizenship today. Today. Both sides say they want to, but they love using them as political pawns and wedge issues in an election year. They should be ashamed of themselves. There should be so much agreement on securing the border and then improving our system to make sure that we can process more quickly legitimate asylum claims and that we can process more quickly the path towards citizenship for people who want to undergo that process legally. Everyone else, stay out. unless you want to follow our rules and come in a legal way. This is not, I would bet 90% of the population agrees on that. But we can't do it because we put these politicians in office who care more about their political party, they care more about winning elections, they care more about being able to use things against the other party than they do about saving lives, securing our country, doing what's right. It's sickening, genuinely sickening. And don't, Trooper Gadd's death, murder, it is a tragedy, would have been a tragedy regardless of the immigration status of the person who killed him. But this adds another layer of anger, of frustration, of sadness. It was fully preventable. At any one of those junctures in time when this man was contacted by law enforcement for breaking the law and should have been shipped back to the country he came from, it was preventable. And that 27-year-old trooper would be alive today. His 2-year-old daughter would have a dad. His wife would have a husband. And we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. Shameful to every single politician in the state of Washington who has supported that policy, every politician in the state of Washington who has not pushed back about what's happening at our southern border, not only because of this, but because all the fentanyl that keeps being trafficked into our state, killing people on our streets, in their homes, in our schools. Shameful. Public servants, my ass. Every single freaking one of them's got to go. Unreal. The incompetence, the indifference. Like I said, sickening. Sickening. King 5?
So it appears that they added that same paragraph that you read, they added to their story yesterday afternoon.
Good.
But they did not change the title or focus on that or even go into his past convictions, nothing, just that ICE had a detainer on him.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
That's about it.
All right. So we've talked about on immigration. Again, this is the natural result of policies. When you let people unvetted into our country, when you don't say there are consequences for your action, you came here illegally and you can stay here and break the law and hurt people and do whatever you want and we're not going to do anything to you. This is the result of that. Same thing when it comes to, the way that we've approached homelessness and substance abuse. We've seen what the policies have done. The policies around that have led to a worse homeless crisis than we've ever had before. More people living on the streets than ever before. Billions of dollars in spending for nothing to show for it. More people dying in on our sidewalks, in encampments, in alcoves, and we want to act like that's empathy and we're just, holier than thou, some righteous state where, we care about these people. We let them die on the sidewalks. Again, sickening. You're all sickening me today. There's so much stuff in the show today where I would lose my freaking mind if I did not have this platform to vent about it with all of you sane people who see this and who understand what the hell is going on. Now, among this, I will say, I feel like there are some small glimpses of hope that sanity is on the horizon. In a moment, we're going to talk about the election that happened last night in California and some really good steps that the city of San Francisco, of all places, is taking to try to rectify their failed policies on the drug crisis. Now, in Seattle, our friend Jonathan Cho had an update that gives me a little optimism. He tweeted yesterday, in a stunning reversal, Seattle says it will not renew the lease of DESC's Navigation Center in Little Saigon. So DESC is a contractor that helps with homelessness and connecting people to services. There have always been, wherever there's a DESC center, there have been issues around it. In fact, the block of Seattle with the most 911 calls per block is in, or was at one point, probably still is in front of the King County Courthouse where there's a DESC facility. Jonathan had said that neighbors were blaming this particular low-barrier homeless shelter for open-air drug use, crime, 911 calls spiking in the area. As Jonathan characterizes it, Seattle saying it's not going to renew this lease is a massive win for that community. Here's Jonathan's report.
Why now, though, sir? Why is this happening? Well, it's something that we've been assessing the model. We know that we've been listening to community for many years about the navigation center. And while we know that those are necessary services in the city, we know that the CID also has been struggling with a lot of issues.
So this is DESC's navigation center here in Little Saigon. Several years ago, before this place opened, the community fought against it, did not want it here, concerned that all the open-air drug use would spill out into the community, and lo and behold, you have more than a dozen people doing blues and fetty everywhere.
Yeah, the navigation center was a huge magnet for just crime and just people hanging around in encampments and camps and fires.
Yeah, and that's expected. You have people who are going to congregate where the services are, but it's up to DESC, it's up to the city of Seattle to make sure that, yes, we need places where people can go to get services, but if you've got a low barrier shelter, which means you can be high as a kite in that shelter that the taxpayers are helping to fund, you have to know that problems are going to come along with that, and you have to properly address them, or you cannot thrust that onto a community. And Little Saigon, we know everywhere in the Chinatown International District, they've just been given the short end of the stick. Democrats and progressives want to use them as political pawns. Oh, we love the Asian community. Don't tell them we're going to shove a big homelessness complex in their backyard and not consult them about it. Ridiculous. So this is a huge win. And I will say, as frustrated as we have all been about the direction of, decriminalization of drugs, hands-off approach, leave people where they are, they can camp wherever they're at. The poster child for that has been San Francisco. I would say, for the last few years, that's definitely been the worst place in the country when it comes to the drug crisis and the homelessness crisis, and a few leaps and bounds ahead of us, not only in going downhill, but I think also in trying to rectify the situation. So there was an election last night in California, and there were two measures in particular on the ballot that had to do with fixing the crazy. In fact, our friend Tom Wolf tweeted about it. Remember, we had Tom Wolf on Sundays with subscribers. He is a former drug addict who was homeless in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, addicted to heroin and fentanyl, and was able to turn his life around only because he got arrested. So he celebrated the passage of Proposition F. He said, Prop F is passed in San Francisco. This is a step in the right direction to hold people accountable, get them into treatment, and defund the drug dealers. And not only did Prop F pass, but Prop E pass too. And this is overwhelming. 62.6% for Prop E, which we'll talk about momentarily, 65.4% for Prop F. In San Francisco, as you'll learn in my description of what both those things are, this is pretty stunning for voters who went that far to the left, saw the horror that it caused, and are like, ooh, let's snap back towards reason and logic. So this is from KQED in San Francisco. Propositions E and F in San Francisco appear headed for victory. So let me give you a description of both of them. Proposition E would weaken the authority of the citizen-led San Francisco Police Commission. Thank God. All these woke citizens who want to tell the police what they should be doing. I'm okay with a little bit of oversight, but I'm sorry, when you have ideologues trying to dictate how police respond to dangerous, violent crime, that's a recipe for disaster. So Prop E would weaken the authority of San Francisco's citizen-led police commission. It would also allow the San Francisco Police Department to deploy surveillance technology like facial recognition, implement public surveillance cameras and drones, loosen restrictions around vehicle chases, and exempt officers from filing paperwork after using force on a suspect, so long as the person suffered no injuries. Talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but let me talk about Prop F. Prop F would allow the city, get this, to require welfare recipients to be drug tested and enter treatment programs if they're suspected of using illegal drugs. If a person declined treatment, they would no longer get cash and could be evicted from their housing. Well, you don't say. It says more than 5,000 San Franciscans used welfare last year, according to the County Adult Assistance Program. The Human Services Agency administers the program and estimates roughly 30% of the city welfare recipients have a substance abuse disorder. So if you want money from the taxpayers to help you get by, you cannot be using drugs. And if you are using drugs and you test positive, you got to go through treatment in order to get welfare. That should not be controversial. Continuing to just give money to people who are drug addicted, that doesn't help them at all. In fact, it only hurts them. It allows them to stay in their addiction comfortably, funded by the taxpayers. How stupid is that? How dumb is that? So this is like a miraculous turnabout for San Francisco. On the policing thing, Proppy, I never liked talking about increased police surveillance and surveillance drones and facial recognition. I'd want to know more about how that's going to be implemented. I don't want my face on facial recognition when I'm out and about in a particular city. Like, I get it, Big Brother's everywhere. If I go to the airport, I'm absolutely on facial rec. But, some of those things, I'm curious to what end they need that. Is it in the tenderloin? Is it to identify specific drug dealers, etc.? But a proposition that gives more power back to the police to try to pursue criminals and takes away some of these burdensome regulations about like, oh, you put a guy in handcuffs, you had to twist his arm a little bit. Well, you better check out for 3 hours while you go fill out a use of force report, head back to the precinct. That happens in Seattle too. Utter waste of time. Ridiculous, burdensome regulations forced on them by citizen commissions. Takes them off the street where they could be saving lives. So to see San Francisco's about face has been heartwarming. And I love that so much. And we've seen it in Oregon too, right? Oregon has backtracked. We've talked on the show about how they went head first into drug decriminalization, and then they're like, never mind. that didn't go over well for us. And so I asked subscribers in our daily subscriber show poll on Patreon, Locals, and X, I said both Oregon and San Francisco have taken steps to walk back policies that took a hands-off approach to drug abuse. Do you believe Washington State will follow suit? A lot of you are saying yes, but not surprisingly, you're not willing to just take it on faith that we're next. Seeing is believing. Kathleen says, I hope so. Harold Burns says, I believe it will take a while for our elected idiots. Okay, I guess I'm not being very undivided on the show today either. I'm a little angry, so I get it. To come around sooner or later, reality will hit them in the face like a dead mackerel. Man, that's very descriptive, Harold. Let's see. And he says, what form this Piskian realization will take is yet to be revealed, of course. My suspicion is it will either be a crime epidemic so severe as to cause loss of local autonomy, or the electorate finally waking up to the fact that we need to flush out the loony bin in Olympia and get a fresh batch in. Carrie Herder says, yes, but I don't think it will be anytime soon. Mike Berta says, Washington tends to follow California's lead, for better or worse, right? We've seen them follow California in a lot of very bad ways. And hopefully they would then, if California is the first to wake up, follow them out of the abyss. I'm fine with that. I'm always going to be fine with anyone, no matter how fringe they've been, no matter how unreasonable they've been. No matter how crazy the policies they've pushed, I'm fine with them coming back to the light. I welcome it. I might have something to say about it for a little bit, but still come back. You're welcome. There's always an opportunity for anyone to come back to the land of sanity and common sense. And you'll only get a little bit of guff from me for the time you spent over on the dark side. Donald Shaw says, I believe that the numbers of death will be their motivations. Numbers do not lie. I agree, but also, how many more deaths do we need from fentanyl? How many more deaths do we need from fentanyl for them to treat it with even a fraction of the urgency that they treated COVID-19 with? COVID-19, I mean, you had people staying in their homes. You were putting people out of business. And you don't want to put any sort of regulation or rules or restrictions on people who are killing themselves on the streets of downtown Seattle? Despite the fact that you see a graph that's looks like a rocket taken off to space? So I feel like there's been enough deaths, don't you? More than enough. So if deaths is the threshold for waking up, man, I hate to see just how many deaths it's going to take. Let's see. Jim says they might, but only if we, the citizens, chide them into it. I agree. No relenting. No peace. No peace. All right. Coming up next, remember the WSDOT whistleblower who said his job was just to be a state economist. He had to forecast gas prices. And when Governor Inslee's Climate Commitment Act passed, he forecasted that it would, yes, of course, increase gas prices. That's what it was designed to do. But he says he was told to shut up about it, to be quiet about it. Well, now he, Scott Smith, is filing a lawsuit against the state of Washington officially, led by the Citizen Action Defense Fund. Scott Smith and Jackson Maynard with the Citizen Action Defense Fund will be joining us coming up next. First, I've been talking about my success on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program. I love hearing from you guys about your success as well. You know, when I say I lost almost 30 pounds in 2 months, I'm sure some people are like, oh my gosh, that's probably just like really, really atypical. It's not. For people who stick to the program, which it's not magic, you do have to stick to it. It's not easy. I can tell you that firsthand, but the results and the payoff is so good. That's what helps you stick to it for those 60 days where you get fantastic results. I've heard from people, we got an email from someone who lost 54 pounds and who's still going strong on the program. I hear from people all the time who lost 20 to 30 pounds in a month or two. So yeah, not magic, but it is something that is not only going to work quickly, but you're going to be able to maintain the weight loss in the long run. You know, some of the things being pushed on the market right now, drugs and injections and all of that, what do you hear when people stop taking it? That they just gain all the weight back. So you can look for some quick fix to it, but Eastside Weight Loss Clinic is a long-term solution to help you learn what to eat in the right portions and then how to move on and still live your life and enjoy life, but do it in a healthier way where you feel better about yourself and you have more energy. So do what I did, what so many others have done. Schedule a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team at eastsideweightlossclinic.com. That's eastsideweightlossclinic.com. You can do the entire program virtually. Never have to step foot in an office if you do not want to. All right, so we covered this extensively when it happened. A whistleblower came out, former WSDOT economist, in a report by the King 5 investigators, and said he was basically pressured to lie about the impact that the Climate Commitment Act would have on gas prices. But he knew, and he'd been a public sector economist for his whole career, and he told King 5, look, it was simple math. You know, if you're out there and you're selling carbon credits at auction, you do the math, and then they're going to, of course, pass that along to people at the gas pump. And so he had these predictions as an economist that he gave to his bosses at WSDOT, that they gave to the governor, hey, this is going to increase gas prices, but they wanted him to be quiet about it. That was his assertion. So when this story came out, it was really a blockbuster story, and I think not a surprise, given that Governor Inslee continues to lie. He continues to deny that a policy his office, his own staff said in 2014 was designed to raise gas prices. He continues to deny that it's raising gas prices because that's simply not a popular thing with the vast majority of Washingtonians. So Scott Smith comes out. He tells his story to King 5. He retains counsel, my attorney. Scott Smith and I have the same attorney, Jackson Maynard, with the Citizen Action Defense Fund. And they have now, because the state refused to make this right, they've decided to sue the state of Washington. Jackson Maynard with Cadiff and Scott Smith, the WSDOT whistleblower, were kind enough to join us today to talk about that lawsuit. Jackson, let's start with you first. So explain to people, just practically speaking, why the lawsuit is coming now and what you see as the basis for it.
Sure. We filed a lawsuit yesterday in Thurston County Superior Court alleging whistleblower retaliation against Scott. He was the main economist at the Department of Transportation and was pressured to lie to fit the governor's narrative about the cost impacts of cap and trade on the cost of fuel. His main job was to do these fuel estimates. And when he refused to do that, they retaliated against him in 9 different ways that we outline in our lawsuit, some big ways, some small ways. But the bottom line is we are to the point now where we are ready to fight for him in court and make sure that he gets the compensation he's due as a result of their mistreating him for him trying to do his job with integrity.
Yeah. Scott, I'm sure that, I think for most good whistleblowers, they're the kind that never sought out to be a whistleblower. They didn't want any part of it. They're just trying to do what's right. So for it to come to this, to have to be now at the center of a lawsuit that's a pretty public one, how do you feel about it?
Boy, you're not kidding, Brandi. That's the last thing I wanted to. I kind of saw it coming when I heard the governor's comments, and I tried hard to get out of the way of the train, as we would call it in the parlance. But I had the bad fortune that I had to do these price estimates. So there really was no place to hide. And then after the fact, I tried to kind of talk them off the cliff, but there just wasn't any stopping them. I so wish that this didn't happen. This is no fun, trust me.
Can I ask you what you're doing now, Scott?
Well, I'm visiting family. I'm at my mother's house right now. I'm in New Orleans. Been applying for jobs. Pretty tough when you're 64. It's not the same as when you're in your 40s. Let's put it that way. Other than that, just trying to kind of keep it together and kind of go on with my life.
It's hard to move on with your life, though, when you're, front page news back in Washington State. And so, just going back to it, and people who watch the show will be very familiar. We've played some of the King 5 reporting on this. And correct me if I'm wrong, cap and trade, this was a policy that you actually thought was the right policy for the state. Is that correct?
I'm pretty much straight up the road an economist. That's how if you'd ask me who I am, that's how I identify myself. And this is just doctrinaire economic stuff. You use the price signal to let consumers ration themselves. It's a market-friendly solution. So the concept of a cap and trade program is I'm very much in favor of that. Again, Brandi, this doesn't have anything. It does get kind of confusing, I know, to the uninitiated, but it doesn't have anything to do about that.
Yeah.
This has to do with the fact that they asked me to do something wrong. I didn't do it, and they got rid of my job.
We continue to sort of see the same line from the governor. He's never really fully backed away from his claim that this isn't raising gas prices, despite, ample evidence. And as you put it, 6th grade math that shows that, yeah, that's what it's designed to do. And it is raising gas prices. Why do you think that they're not willing to just sort of be truthful about it?
Well, I'm going to defer to Jackson on that one.
Jackson, why do you think that they're not willing to be truthful about it?
I think it's just politics. The Washington Policy Center has done some great reporting in January about the fact that the governor knew years ago that this program would have exactly the effect that Scott described, that it's basic economics, that if you increase the cost for something, you're going to decrease demand. And that's where your carbon reductions come from. And yet, for some reason, for the last year or so, the governor has just staunchly taken the position, oh, no, it's not going to happen here with this particular program. And my client was stuck. He saw the numbers. He was trying to play it straight. He has decades of experience. And they came down on him like a ton of bricks when he refused to lie. And that's why we had to file the suit.
What's your burden of proof here, Jackson? I mean, to say, is it as simple as is Scott more believable, or is the government, or what's your burden of proof in a case like this?
Yeah, it's preponderance of the evidence. We're in a civil case, and we've got 4 different causes of action. We've got 2 statutory whistleblower retaliation claims under 2 sections of the statute, wrongful termination, and then just basic negligence. And those are all fancy legal ways of just saying, look, my client was treated wrong. It was against the law. They can't do it, and they need to compensate him.
Yeah, in preponderance of the evidence, like I said, Scott's obviously a nice guy. He comes across as trustworthy to me. Like, there's no real benefit for him to make this stuff up. But do you have cold, hard evidence that will meet that threshold, that it was retaliation?
Yeah, we have a few different types of evidence. And I would note that discovery is ongoing. So we are serving discovery requests, including finding out what the governor and his staff communicated about Scott and what they knew about the cap and trade program and its impacts on fuel. So we're going to get that information as well. But we have his contemporaneous notes that he made regarding these meetings. We have emails that he kept with DOT staff that back up the claims that we're making in the lawsuit. And we're ready to take this fight, to do discovery, to depose who we need to depose within the administration to be able to get this thing resolved.
Yeah. Scott, with everything that's happened, kind of being forced to leave this job, you mentioned it's hard at your age to find, although I think you're still very young, find a new job, the being at the center of news headlines. If you could go back and just do what they told you to do and just not say what you said, would you do it?
No.
Why not?
And Brandi, I thought really hard about it. I went out of my way to soft pedal it as much as I could. I had no intention of picking a fight with these folks. That was exactly the opposite of what I tried, but it was all for naught. But no, you just can't. You can't do. It would have been. It's kind of a question of agreeing if the emperor has new clothes. I mean, it was January. Everybody saw what happened. You didn't have to be an economist. You could just, if you put gasoline in your car in January, you notice something, and then there were stories all over the place about, hey, why is the price of gasoline falling everywhere but in Washington? Why all of a sudden do we have the highest prices in the country? It's dumb. I guess that's the thing. It's hard to fight that. It's hard to fight. And I don't do well with dumb. And that's a flaw of mine, I guess. But it's hard to fight dumb. People say the sky is not blue. What do you say? You start stuttering, basically. I mean, it was obvious, especially January. I mean, we were living it while this stuff was going on, and there were contemporaneous stories about it. How could you think otherwise?
There's an element of this too, like the old country song, are you going to believe your lying eyes or are you going to believe me? I mean, as he said, it was obvious, and yet they didn't want him to state the obvious.
Yeah, I think this last question is a question really that both of you can weigh in on. We'll start with you, Jackson, and then Scott, I'll have you answer the same question. Obviously, there's a monetary element of this. I think whenever someone is treated in a way where they lose their income and their ability to support themselves, there's a monetary element. But what else would make this right for the state of Washington? I mean, when people will know I'm at the center of a public records lawsuit that is also about trying to change behavior of the government. So what can we get out of this that will change behavior?
So, I think the monetary element is important because it's part of the message that you send to the government that they can't railroad people like this, that they can't bully them and stomp on them for the rank and file for political purposes. So we are suing for loss of income, pension, loss of reputation, and punitive damages. But the compensation there is about making him whole, but it also sends a message to the government and to other folks who want to try to bully state employees. And that, I know, is very important for Scott and part of why we're bringing this case.
Scott, why don't we end with you on that? What would make this whole situation right for you above and beyond the compensation?
Well, I told you I'm an economist, and I've been a government economist since like 1987. And I don't want I don't want them to do this to anybody else. And that matters to me. I mean, I want to get fixed. I've told you, I'm 64. Things aren't, I'd like to keep working. I like working. But on top of it, in a more philosophical vein, I don't want to see anybody else have to go through this. There's a way, this is part of the tendons of government, these sergeant majors, and they're not in my field, but in a million fields, guys who just make the place run. And for somebody to mess with them and to injure the system is kind of messing with what makes government work. And I spent my life in government. I kind of like it to work. It's a noble calling. Yeah, and to have it degraded is certainly offensive, but injurious to democracy also.
Yeah, that's Scott Smith, the WSDOT whistleblower who was forced out of his job for simply telling the truth, that the Climate Commitment Act raises gas prices. He is now officially suing the state of Washington to make him whole again, and also hopefully to try to stop some of the type of retribution he saw, allegedly, for doing his job, represented by the Citizen Action Defense Fund in Jackson, Maynard. And again, in the interest of transparency, we are also represented by the Citizen Action Defense Fund in our public records lawsuit against the city of Seattle, which is ongoing. I am so glad that Scott Smith is taking this step. As I think you can tell, I don't see him as someone who really wants all the attention that this has brought, being featured in these King 5 investigative reports, etc. But for someone who was a lifelong public sector economist, who was able to go through his career doing what he was asked to do, doing it well and having no issues, and then, by what he says, being basically pressured to lie about something that he'd never had to lie about what the gas prices would look like, all to protect Governor Inslee's Climate Commitment Act, which we are going to repeal in November, and I will get so much joy out of doing so. All right, coming up next, Democrats at 2 a.m. this morning, they decided to push through that bill, HB 1589, which will move PSE away from natural gas. 2 a.m. That's how little they think about you. They did it at 2 a.m. We'll discuss the ins and outs of what happened. It is pretty wild. First, I've been encouraging you guys to take the First Mark Challenge. First Mark is a local insurance broker. They've been doing this for a long time. And what the challenge entails, and Mike and I took it last year, is talking to them about the insurance you have and your insurance needs. And they're going to go out, and the challenge is on them to go out and see if they can find you better rates, if they can find you better coverage, and if they can convince you to become a member of the First Mark family. Jackie emailed us yesterday. Jackie took the challenge and told us, I wanted to let you know I did the First Mark Challenge, and it was wonderful. My insurance is where it needs to be, and they answered all the questions I had that helped me make the right decisions in my car insurance swap. If anyone is on the fence about trying First Mark, I hope they do it, because it's really helpful, and they might learn something they weren't aware of. And I could not agree more. Even if you don't switch over to First Mark and have them handle all your insurance needs, you learn a ton about the insurance you have and the insurance you have that you might not even need, which was the case for Mike and I. Dave Taylor is the CEO of First Mark.
I really want to encourage folks, don't try to navigate this current market by yourself. I believe you need to get with a broker. Okay, obviously I'd love them to come to First Mark, but at a minimum they need to be with a broker that works with numerous carriers that can give them the advice they need and really help them navigate this right now, because it's complicated.
Yeah. And the best part is you never pay First Mark anything. Even if you're a member of the First Mark family, you never pay them anything. They go about, they do this for you, they look at, and they're constantly reevaluating your insurance needs, your prices, and all of that. So you have someone in your corner to deal with the complex insurance market, and you never have to pay them. It truly is a no-brainer. FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com. The very best part is they work for you. 2 a.m. 2 a.m. That's what time Democrats in Olympia decided to pass a bill that will make life even less affordable for the working poor in Washington state. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boop. I don't have the enthusiasm for a boop today with this BS. Look, I had a roller coaster of emotions last night. So I start getting texts around like 11 p.m. Saying, hey, they're pushing HB 1589 to the floor for a vote. They're trying to rally enough support to get this thing through. And I had urged you guys for the last few days to call and email your elected leaders. HB 59 is the bill that started as a full-on natural gas ban. No new hookups, and PSE wouldn't have to serve existing customers anymore. Now, it changed form a little bit. Those outright bans came out of the bill, but the bottom line of the bill is the same. It helps PSE move away from natural gas more quickly. It helps them get to the point where they don't have to serve you natural gas anymore. In the meantime, it's going to make your rates rise exponentially, and no one's going to build new homes with gas hookups when they know that that's on the horizon. So it's not a ban by name anymore, but it is a ban in effect. And the reason I had a little bit of an emotional roller coaster is, so I start hearing, it was actually probably a little earlier than that, when I was hearing that Democrats were trying to whip up support for the bill. So it looked like they maybe didn't have enough votes in the House to pass the version that came from them from the Senate. So from what I heard, even Governor Inslee was making phone calls, trying to pressure Democrats who were on the fence to pass this. And PSC, of course, had their own pressure campaign because they're going to make way more money if they can move away from natural gas and force electrification and all of this. So you had, for potentially as long as 9 hours, you had Democrats in their caucus basically trying to shame no votes into becoming yes votes. So I'm on Twitter and I'm trying to talk about what's wrong with this bill. And then it hit me. I thought to myself, I want them to pass it. I want them to pass it. I've never cheered on Democrats to pass a bad policy, I don't think, in my career. But I found myself around midnight saying, pass the damn thing. I freaking love it. Pass the thing. You know why? Because one, I think it has constitutional weaknesses. And I do believe that it can be reversed on a legal challenge. But two, Democrats are going to have to wear it like a scarlet letter all the way through Election Day. And making this the closing act of the legislative session, hurting the poor in Washington state even further, lets voters know that there is no mistaking it. Democrats do not care about hurting the working poor. And they proved it with their vote at 2 a.m. Here it is.
Madam Speaker, there are 50 aye, 45 nay, 2 excused.
Having received a constitutional majority in gross substitute House Bill 1589 as amended by the Senate is declared pass.
2 a.m. Now, there was some testimony before that passage happened. And remind you, this testimony came after hours and hours of reasonable Democrats being under pressure to change their vote, which obviously was done successfully. And the gaslighting never ceases to amaze me, but a couple of the Democratic representatives were trying to push back against the narrative that this will hurt the poor. And it's not just a narrative, it is the truth. This will hurt the poor. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But here's what Representative Beth Dolio said.
This is a big step for our state. It sets our largest utility on a path to look at how we can decarbonize in a way that protects our low-income families, does it by guaranteeing family wage jobs as we build out the system, and at the same time make sure that our children have a sustainable planet to live on, as well as their children and their children, and so forth. Madam Speaker, please join me in voting yes on this bill.
Oh, so not only will it not hurt the poor, it's her assertion, what'd she say, that it'll help the poor?
It sets our largest utility on a path to look at how we can decarbonize in a way that protects our low-income families.
Okay, that's a lie. I love it how you have a policy that absolutely will hurt the poor. Absolutely, no question, puts even more pressure on already strained households. And they find a way to try to spin it as, no, this will help the poor. In fact, it's going to create working class jobs. Yeah, when? What jobs? How many? Those details. We'll get to those details later. Just don't criticize us right now. And it's not just me saying it's going to hurt the poor. It's not just Republicans saying it's going to hurt the poor. We said 2 days ago that a progressive entity, the Washington State Community Action Partnership, changed its mind and came out in an email to Democratic lawmakers and said, we're now opposed to this for the very reason that it'll hurt the poor. And that's what the Community Action Partnership is all about. Their whole goal is to help people who are living in poverty. They said, we're supportive of an orderly transition away from natural gas, but it must be equitable to our low income and named communities. Without sufficient protections for ratepayers, we have changed our position on this bill from neutral to opposed in its current form. If this bill passes, we will assuredly be coming back to the legislature in the very near future with a request for more resources to protect those low-income communities who will experience the deepest impacts. So Washington State Democrats passed this at 2 a.m., knowing full well, having been informed by their own progressive buddies, this will devastate the working poor. This will hurt the working poor worse than anyone else. And Democrats responded to that by saying, let's pass it anyway. In the wee morning hours. And that's why I just came around to let them do it. Let them do it. It'll get reversed on a legal challenge. And then we get to add that to the ever-growing list of proof that Washington state Democrats right now do not care about the working class. They're willing to lie. They're willing to hurt people, to fulfill a climate agenda. They don't care if it's good or bad policy. They don't care that the lieutenant governor of their own party called this a hot mess the way it was written. They don't even care that there's a clear constitutional issue with it that makes it really susceptible to a legal challenge. They just want to push it through because they didn't want to end. This is why. They didn't want to end the session with another loss. You have one party that controls the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. They should be ending every session in celebration. But this has been a very bad session for them. They saw some of their key priorities like rent control, like giving unemployment benefits to striking workers. They saw those shot down. Even some members of their own party said, yeah, we're not doing that. So those were huge losses. All of their pro-crime bills, that didn't get anywhere. And then they had to pass 3 Republican-backed initiatives into law that will undo aspects of their agenda. So here they are the last few days of the session. They're like, this session has sucked. And this bill to ban natural gas is all we have left. I can just see this behind the scenes. If we don't have the votes for this, you know how embarrassing that's going to be? So they just browbeat members of their own caucus, had the governor call them. Can only imagine how those conversations went. And shamed them overnight, spent 9 hours doing it, until enough of them changed their mind where they could pass this crap policy that'll hurt the poor at 2 a.m. This is a freaking gift. This is a gift from God. Honestly, it is the cherry on top of the sundae for all of the things that they have done that we can now point to actually make change in the state of Washington. So thank you, Democrats, for that gift. I have come full circle on this. A+, I'm fully in support of that vote. Now, I wanted to get a little more information about what happened behind the scenes last night, because whipping votes, I mean, that's the process of where basically it's like you're not physically whipping them, but you're tongue lashing them to try to get them to fall in line. So whipping votes for that long of a period of time, I was like, oh my gosh, I can only imagine how crazy that was behind the scenes last night. So we're having Representative JT Wilcox on the Sunday show. And this morning we were taping that interview because he's announced his retirement. And we're talking a little bit in that Sunday interview about just the state of politics in Olympia, generally speaking. But because JT Wilcox was in leadership for so long, before we did the Sunday interview, I wanted to ask him about what the heck from your experience must have been happening behind the scenes. JT Wilcox, welcome back to Undivided.
Well, thanks so much for having me again, Brandi.
Yeah,
thanks for what you're doing.
I know that you had a pre-existing obligation last night, so maybe you weren't on the floor until 2 a.m., but I'm sure in retirement you're not going to miss those nights.
You know, those are actually the ones that you remember, and probably the ones that I am going to miss.
Yeah. So we're talking about it a little bit, but man, they must have tried to whip up votes for 1589 for 7-8 hours. You were the House leader on the Republican side for a long time. What does that tell you about what was happening behind the scenes on the Democratic side?
Well, I was the floor leader for 6 years and House Republican leader for 5 years, and so I've been involved in every big issue for more than a decade. And for them to spend hours and hours and hours trying to get enough votes to pass a bill that had already been passed here is almost unheard of. And I think it must have been brutal in there. And let me just say this, I'm not in a partisan job anymore. There are good Democrats there that want to govern from the middle. And the fact that it took 6 or 7 hours to get 50 of them to vote tells us just how brutal it was. And I feel bad for the people that were subjected to that. I wish more of them would have said no, as they did on the 5 o'clock bill, which was the hospital merger oversight bill, which they killed. This one is a terrible bill. I've said twice on the floor over the last 2 years that I've never been part of passing. I voted no, but I still voted a bill that made so little sense and was so poorly done. And it just shows you where we've gotten now, that in order to save face, they feel like they had to pass this bill at 2 a.m.
Yeah, and I even heard that Governor Inslee was on the phone late into the night trying to pressure some of these Democrats. Is there truth to that?
I don't know the answer to that. I may ask around among some Democrats and find out, but I've been on the end of a lot of governor's calls. Sometimes they were pleasant. One time it was the most unhinged call I've had in my life, both business and politics, and I bet a few of those were made.
Yeah. So I guess you mentioned save face there. And so correct me if you think I'm wrong on any of this. I feel like because there's this issue with the Stryker amendment where it was, the lieutenant governor called this bill a hot mess. They tried to fix it, but they missed one amendment. And then it gets sent over to you guys and the House just concurs. Isn't this just ripe for a legal challenge now?
Well, it sure seems like it. This is not really my policy area, and I'm not an attorney, so I'll kind of leave it to those people. But what I think it obviously is like so many bills this year, they're passing it and thinking, okay, we'll come back next year and fix it. That didn't used to happen. Governor Gregoire and Frank Chop, they were very conscientious, even though they were pursuing policy directions that I didn't agree with. I thought that there was a great deal of due diligence in those days to be sure that what they passed was going to work and that our executive agencies were going to be run as competently as government can be. And I just don't see that anymore. And this bill is a perfect example, as well as the huge rollbacks that a whole bunch of Democrats voted for, embodied in the initiatives that passed recently.
Yeah, and I just want to end with that because I really do. I kind of agree with you that it was like, gosh, we can't have another big loss, in the final days of the session. Let's just shove this thing through and then deal with it later. I feel like it was a bad session for Democrats. I mean, you have a party that controls the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, but you had these initiatives, you had some of their key policies like rent control, paying striking workers that did not go anywhere. And then this absolute boondoggle at the end with the HB 1589. Am I wrong to think that it was a really bad session for the majority party?
Yeah, I think it was a disastrous session for them, full of big rollbacks, full of defeats. And again, when you have big majorities, it's not the minority that beats you. It's because your caucuses don't work anymore. And it reminds me in a lot of ways of what's happening to Republicans in Washington, D.C. But at least they have the excuse of a 2-vote majority. Here in the House, there's 58 Democrats to 40 Republicans. And I think what has happened is they have pushed sort of an academic extremist agenda for several years now. They've passed most of those things. The results are disastrous, and I think that we've got some adults in that Democratic caucus room that are standing up and saying, "We're not going to do this for you anymore," and they're not saying it out loud. And by the way, I respect the hell out of these people. They are people that are trying to fight back right now, and they're in politics, so they don't really want to tear their caucus apart. But the fact that you had large numbers of Democrats voting in favor of those initiatives that just rolled back the policies that had been implemented by Democrats in the last 2 or 3 years tells me that 2 things are happening. First, they're thinking about elections, and second, they wish that they never would have had to vote for these things in the first place.
Yeah, there definitely are some. Go ahead,
Brandi. We need good Republicans and good Democrats, and I want good Democrats to be successful. I just wish that they would have had the weight in their caucus to hold off these things in the last 2 or 3 years.
I mean, good Democrats, and by good I mean moderate, reasonable Democrats. They're dwindling in Olympia, and you can see the effects of that progressive side of the caucus really taking over. We're going to talk more with you about that on Sunday. JT Wilcox, you'll be joining us on Sundays with subscribers because you're retiring. And I already know you have a bunch of good thoughts about the state of politics in Washington, so we'll have you back on Sunday to discuss.
Thanks a lot, Brandi. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, we appreciate that insight from him there. But again, fine. Don't even care. Don't even care. House Bill 1589, push it through at 2 a.m. You do you. We're going to use it against you every single day from now until November. Well, hopefully, and I've already heard rumblings that some entities are going to sue over it to try to get it reversed because, of course, at the end of the day, we don't want reasonable people, left, right, and center, do not want the poorest people in our state to continue to be overburdened by these decisions from a single political party. All right, coming up next, we'll talk very briefly about Super Tuesday. Nikki Haley's donezo. I'm actually surprised. I really thought she was just going to stick with it as long as she could and then hope that Donald Trump went to prison or something. I don't know. We'll talk about that. First, we've been discussing on the show every Thursday with Zach Abraham of Bulwark Capital this disconnect between what the president says about how great the economy is doing and then what we actually see and feel, and then the CEO of Kellogg is on the news saying, hey, people can't afford dinner, so maybe they should just buy cereal for their family because cereal is much cheaper than an actual bona fide dinner for your kids. So I asked Zach on this last Thursday show how he explains this disconnect between what we're being told and what we're feeling.
I think it's a product of goal seeking for data, meaning the Federal Reserve has been adjusting down inflationary metrics for 40 years, some of it for good reason, some of it not. But now I think you're at a position where, much like the unemployment rate, when you understand how the unemployment rate is calculated, if the unemployment rate doesn't stay changed, so if no new workers come into the system and no new workers leave the system for a long enough time, the unemployment rate will go to zero, even though nothing has changed, right? I think they've kind of done the same thing with inflation, where it's not completely bogus, but it's not telling you the story that they're saying it is.
Yeah, so a lot of what you see is misleading. And I think particularly if you're close to retirement or in retirement, making sure that you have someone who's actively managing your risk so your retirement is not put at risk is really critical this year with everything going on. The election, global unrest, rising cost of living, market fluctuations, dishonesty out there. That's what Zach Abraham and his team at Bulwark Capital specialize in. They specialize in risk management. I suggest having a free Know Your Risk portfolio review with Zach and his team at Bulwark. It's a great way just to see if you're overexposed to risk. There is absolutely no obligation. You can schedule your free risk review now at knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All right, America is getting exactly what it didn't want, a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. This is, I still don't think it's going to be a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. They're going to find a way to get old Joe out of there somehow. I don't quite know what Democrats have planned, but they have something planned. Mark my words. Anyway, it was Super Tuesday yesterday. So big day for Trump and for Biden. Trump won everything but Vermont. Biden won everything except American Samoa. And Dean Phillips on the Democratic side and Nikki Haley have both dropped out. So Nikki Haley opted to suspend her campaign. Here's what she said.
In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind." It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that.
Look, I agree with her. I think it's disingenuous when someone's running against, like in this case, Donald Trump, and they attack him left and right in the campaign trail and don't think he's fit. And then they come out and they're like, but I'm supporting him. What, because it's just like you're that beholden to a letter next to someone's name? So I don't know if she's going to eventually endorse him, but I actually prefer her being honest about it than coming out with some fake, like, now I'm supporting him sort of thing. So good for her. Here we are. Trump Biden, that's not where I want to be. RFK Jr. is looking better and better by the day. I had someone on, I did a live Q&A with subscribers last night, and someone asked, Brandi, when are you just going to say that you're voting for Trump? And I don't know yet.
About that too.
Today, I'm not voting for Biden. People say whenever I suggest, like, I'm not sure if I'll vote for Trump, people are like, oh, how could you vote for Biden? It's like, that's not the choice. It doesn't have to be either Trump or Biden. And I made the point on the live Q&A last night about, look, I get it that people say, oh, RFK or something like that is a throwaway vote. If you always call it a throwaway vote, we'll never be in a position to change the system and disrupt the two-party system. And whether it's 1% this year, 10% the next cycle, 20%, 30%, 40%, till you get to a point where someone who's not attached to a major political party can actually make a difference. Incremental change is incremental for a reason. I get it. There's a ton at stake. I'm not saying I'm going to vote for RFK Jr. I get it. There's a ton at stake, and you're like, don't throw away your vote, because if we end up with Biden, the world is over. But at some point, I do believe that Americans who are deeply annoyed with the choices that we're being given, with the party system as it is, have to decide whether they're willing to commit to a slow, methodical, incremental process to try to change that. So I don't know who I'm going to vote for yet.
So don't you think that before that can happen,
yes,
before the actual vote or, the vote growing, because that could take decades for that to grow and grow. I think something that might work quicker would be to form support around those candidates that actually, because right now, money is what gets you elected, because it really is, that's, you have to have money. That's probably the reason that Nikki dropped out. She had no more money. And so I think that it's creating a system around an independent candidate that could actually get you enough money to stay in the race and make a significant mark on people while campaigning and actually leading up to an election. Because without money, money talks.
But that's part of the incremental change, though.
Well, I know.
You are not going to overnight, all of a sudden, have the biggest political donors in this country say, we're all going to give our money to RFK, or enough to make it competitive. These candidates, whether it's directly in their own funds or PACs that spend on their behalf, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to win the presidency. So I do believe at some point it is going to be, it has to be a slow, gradual shift. You're not going to, who's the candidate that so many people are going to love who's independent, that you've got all this money that just moves over to them and then they can win? I think incrementally over time, if you can show that you've got a good candidate that year, get some support behind them, they do well enough where the next time maybe that person runs again, or maybe it's someone else. You can't do it all at once.
I don't know. I might disagree because of let's use the initiatives as an example. We just got a big donor to back these initiatives, and that's what made it happen. And if someone I know Elon Musk last night came out saying he wasn't going to give money to either candidate, and not him meeting with Trump didn't sway that or whatever. But if he was to take millions and give it to a candidate and make a difference in the way that the way that elections happen, I think that it will take something that drastic to happen. And over time, there's different candidates and you sway people back and forth. And then 4 years is actually, it goes fast sometimes, but it's a long time. And so that's generations, and you have to every time evaluate those voters. And I just think it is going to take something huge to get an independent, person elected.
I don't know what better environment there would be than this one. There's never going to be a right time. People are always going to say, oh, that's a spoiler vote. Oh, that's a wasted vote. They're always going to say, the right's always going to say too much is at stake. The left's always going to say too much is at stake. We can't lose this one. Do it next time. Do it in 4 years from now. But it's like, have there been two more disliked in terms of the reasonable middle of America? Polls show nobody wants this rematch. We don't want a Biden-Trump rematch. I get it that some people like Trump. I really don't think that any Democrats are super crazy about Biden. But this cannot be the best we can do. Two guys in their 80s who it's just ridiculous.
I agree. This was the opportunity.
100% opportunity.
But maybe it'll take the Republican Party, I don't know, but attaching themselves to an independent, saying, hey,
that'll never happen either.
No, I'm just saying, but well, I mean, maybe that's the evolution of the party, right? So the party has gone this far to the right, so maybe the evolution is like, okay, this is what we want to see happen. We're going to lose every election if we don't find our way back here, and so maybe that's what it takes. And so I know it will never happen at this point, but maybe it will someday.
Well, you have to decide, like, we're not waiting any longer. There has to be some sort of upheaval or whatever it is.
Yeah, because right now we are a two-party system.
Yeah,
and until we decide something different, that's what it's going to be.
Yes, so. I get it. I'm just not ready to say who I'm going to vote for the presidency yet. Well, eventually I will. Nicole knows who she's voting for.
Yeah, I'm not voting for Biden.
Yes, I said it's not to me, it's not a choice. It's between just the two of them.
Well, and RFK, I don't think.
Who knows? I voted for the Libertarian in 2020. So, okay, we're way over. So let's just move on from this Trump conversation. All right, sellwithwes.com. We've been telling you that if you're thinking about selling your home at any point in 2024, give Wes Jones a call now. Go to sellwithwes.com. It's important to get a head start before the Fed drops interest rates, so you know that your home is going to be positioned for success right away as soon as those rates drop and there's a rush of buyers to the market. Sellwithwes.com. He says, visit the website. He'll talk to you about what they can do for you, and he'll come pay you a visit.
I'll come out, it'll be me personally, and I'll come out, kind of go through what our process is, assess your situation, and then, at that point, if we're going to be working together, then, we'll bring in the staging, I'll get it pre-inspected, and then we will do any of the repairs, any of the upgrades, and when we start doing those types of activities, the more time, the better, just so it's a little less stressful.
Yeah, no reason to have a stressful experience when you don't need to. So get in touch with Wes, sellwithwes.com. He's going to do a free market analysis so you can know how your home is positioned, what your expectations can be depending on where your house is. You can start by using their home value calculator to see how much your home is worth. Just plug in your address. It might be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, some questions and comments, and then we'll get to our closing sanity check, which is also going to take us to San Francisco and yesterday's election. H with a $20 super chat. Do you think it's time to start naming the lobbyists that give the Democrats money to pass these crazy laws? I mean, we know the groups more or less, right? Like, we know the unions, etc., and the people who are behind these things. You can name lobbyists if you want to, but even lobbyists have their strings pulled by someone else. Stacy says, I can't say your last name, Stacy, Zarkinski. That's the best I got. Has either of the Washington gubernatorial candidates said what their policy on Washington being a sanctuary state is if they're elected? I haven't seen that. I could be wrong. Just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean they didn't, but come on, Bob Ferguson's all on board the sanctuary state train. I would imagine sanctuary state train. I would imagine that both Semi Bird and Dave Reichert would not be opposed to changing those policies where they can. Remember, they can't. So they can control like the Washington State Patrol and how state-run agencies interact with the feds, but a city like Seattle can, of its own accord, dictate what its police department does, etc. Let's see. So I think the rule is you can kind of do more as a city, but you can't do less than the state is doing. So there's some things that overlap, but if Seattle wants to be woke and crazy, they're going to find ways to do that. Let me see. Nancy Campbell says, I'll bet real money that if Inslee goes to the trooper's funeral, they will all turn their backs. I don't know. It's up to the family whether they want him there. I don't get a say in it, and whatever decision they make is the right decision. Ben Pascal says, small steps in the right direction help when we're years out from repairing damage done by the left. Bigger steps needed. Yes, I do think, though, this is a legislative session worth celebrating. We all get a celebratory drink on Friday. This session could have been so much worse. You think about the bad stuff that a little public pushback helped kill. You guys did that. I mean, rent control, paying striking workers, all the initiatives, those 3 that were signed, not taking it easy on juvenile offenders, that crazy bill that would have let Gary Ridgway vote and serve on a jury. So many things, even your elections that didn't make it through. I mean, they basically had no big wins because the gas bill isn't a win. They know it. They're embarrassed about it. That's why they did it at 2 a.m. You don't pass a bill you're proud of at 2 a.m. It doesn't take you 9 hours to to whip up enough votes in your caucus, the majority caucus, if it's a bill worthy of being proud of. They just didn't want, it was the last thing where they're like, we can't fail on this policy because then we look like real losers.
Yeah, I'm kind of with the dumb thing. I think that it's not being taken seriously anymore. They're going for these crazy things. If they just got to business, like, you know, if you want to save the octopus, save the octopus. Because
octopus farming. Oh, they did get octopus farming through.
But you know what? Good for octopus.
Fine.
They don't have to worry about moving up to up the coast.
You can come up here,
Northwest.
Octopuses, because we can't farm you in Washington State.
Fine. But I mean, if you really want to make a difference, pass these bills that make sense, that you can get support, that the people are behind.
Right.
Because we all love octopus. I mean, some people like to eat it, but we all care about the octopus.
Yeah, they're cool little, cool, smart little things.
Yeah, living in humane habitats. But I'm just saying, I don't think it's being taken seriously. They're going for they're shooting for the stars here, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, just get in there and make policy that's going to make the people that vote you in, their lives better.
And I agree with that, but that doesn't apply to the octopus bill, because we don't have octopus farming. So they spent time passing an octopus farming bill for something that isn't happening. I do agree, though, that they should look at these smaller things. Policy that's built on necessity. Mm-hmm. Is there a necessity to do this? If so, great, let's craft a policy around it. But there are policies built on these wild ideas and hopes and dreams about the future of fears, like, what if we farm octopus?
No farming elephants either. They're smart too. Might as well
and
pass
who
the bill.
knows? You don't know. There could be a land bridge that pops up in the middle of the ocean. Pangea, was that what it was? We were all one? Is that it? See, I pay attention in geography. And then the elephants could come here from Africa. They could be here.
Pangea.
And then, Pangea. Yeah. Wasn't that what it was when all of the continents were one, allegedly, and then they broke apart?
I think so, yeah.
All I'm saying, if you're going to preemptively ban octopus farming, why not, just in case, the continents fuse back together, the elephants come over from Africa,
That's right.
Why not have a law in place in Washington State to protect the elephants, just in case? Like, let's do it. Let's do it, right?
But you know what? I love animals, and if they were worried that was coming here, fine. I don't care. But then, do something useful that is affecting us tomorrow, and it's just so frustrating. But it has to be so extreme and so radical that they can brag about it. It's just ridiculous. Instead of saying, hey, you know how your life's a little bit better right now? That's me. But they want all the credit, right? They want to say, we did these crazy things.
Big headlines.
Just to please the other crazies.
Yeah. On the Watchdog Whistleblower, Sharon Barber says, I don't like it when whistleblowers get taxpayer money for suing, but in this case, I don't mind. But you have to, right? It's like, I get that too. I mean, we're suing the city of Seattle, and it's like, if we win, we're going to get taxpayer money. Although I actually would rather that money be in our hands than the hands of Seattle city government. Like, we'll find a better way to use it than they would use it. But that's the only avenue and recourse you have to correct behavior by the government and to keep them in line. In this case, Scott is owed it. Scott lost his job. He was nearing retirement, and now he's looking for a job, and it's ridiculous.
And that's on Inslee.
It's on Inslee. On the gas bill, Krista M. says, politicians are nothing more than two arguing parents going through a divorce while the kids, a.k.a. constituents, suffer. Yeah, Captain Cranky Pants. Since HB 1589 only affects PSE and their customers, I'm wondering if other smaller utilities could step in and take over PSE's natural gas customers. That could happen. That's very possible. It's a little beyond my knowledge of the current situation and whether, Cascade or whatever would do that. So, but something to think about. All right, good comments per the usual. Let us get to our closing sanity check, which again takes us down to San Francisco. So in addition to the common sense propositions that were passed to, tackle substance abuse, to help give more power back to the police, Proposition G also passed in San Francisco. We talked about this effort on the show previously because it has to do with a subject we care an awful lot about, and that is the dumbing down of our education in schools. This from the San Francisco Standard. San Francisco voters approve Proposition G, encouraging algebra in 8th grade. So remember, they got rid of all these actual learning requirements because it's racist or whatever, and you can't fail anyone. Well, 84% of San Franciscans say, we should have algebra in 8th grade. I think the issue here is they can't actually force it. onto San Francisco's Unified School District. So it's not a legally binding proposition, but what it does, and it was placed on the ballot by some members of the Board of Supervisors, they said it would officially encourage schools to offer algebra and, quote, support the development of a coherent math curriculum at every level. So whether they decide to implement it or not, this is a pretty good signal that one of the most progressive places in the country has come to realize that, yes, we do need basic standards in learning for our kids, and that does include math. That has been your sanity check for today. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you so much for being here, for listening to my long ramblings about all the things that are angering me, causing division in our state and on issues where no such division should exist. We should all agree on this stuff. We'll see you back here on the live show tomorrow at noon. If you have not signed up to support our show already, please do so. undividedpod.com. undividedpod.com. It's just $5 a month. What a screaming deal. See you tomorrow.